Hey everybody, it's Josh here again. For today's video, I wanted to talk about my entire IT career from 2007 until today. So I'll cover things like the job title, like how I got each job, the salary for each job, my job duties at each job, my likes and dislikes, and why I ended up quitting each job in my career. I've done a lot of weird stuff in my career that's led to a lot of interesting, unexpected scenarios for me, and I've never really had like a solid goal that I just stuck to, like I want to be a pen tester and nothing else. Like I've never really had anything like that. I've always just tried my best. I've done my best at work, and I've studied and all this stuff, and I just kind of go wherever the wind has happened to take me. Near the end, I'll give some advice on stuff I wish I would have done differently along the way. So if you're thinking about getting into IT or security, you should definitely smash the like button, subscribe, and keep on watching. So my very first job in IT was actually at a community college working part-time, and I got about $10K a year for this job. It was the position was a computer lab assistant. Basically, how I ended up getting this job is I started going to that community college to get prerequisites for computer science, because I heard that you could make like $50K as a programmer, and I was like, man, that's a lot of money. So I started going to community college for CS prereqs, and I was sitting in the computer lab, and I would see the lab assistants come in and kind of help other students with their work and other computer problems, and I was like, man, I can do that. So I just went and applied, and I didn't have any actual IT experience or anything. So on my resume and application, I just like put all the computer classes that I was taking and like my programming classes, which was like, I think I had taken like only 2 classes, like intro to Java and like VB or something. But I eventually got hired. The tasks for this job was a lot of basic kind of help desk things, like resetting passwords and helping students and faculty do random things on computers, like helping them use Office and stuff, refilling toner on the printers, cleaning the labs during the quarter break, this kind of thing. Oddly enough, this is probably my favorite job in my whole career in IT, because everything was so simple. I could get instant results for the stuff that I did. My manager is super nice. All my coworkers were super nice, and the job was just fun. And the only dislike I have for this job is that I was making $10K a year, and you can't really live on that even back then. And I ended up quitting this job because I actually moved into another like full-time position in the same department. So in 2009, when I became full-time, my new title was IT specialist, and I worked there until 2017. My starting salary was $49K, and then when I quit in 2017, it was around $75 or $76K. So how I ended up getting this position is pretty interesting. So about in 2008, like halfway through my lab assistant position, I started developing like pretty decent skills. I had some decent scripting skills, and I had a decent grasp on how Windows networking worked, like with Active Directory and all of that. And around this time, I noticed a full-time staff in the same department where I was working. I noticed like they were probably either going to get let go, or they're going to quit, or something would happen where they would be gone. Like I won't get into too much detail about that, but after noticing this, I kind of found their resume like on the network, and then I found a lot of the work they were doing, and I basically like made myself into a clone of what that person did. Like I practiced all the stuff that they did, and I got really good at all of that in addition to what I was already doing, kind of in preparation for them leaving the department. And sure enough, when that time ended up happening, I ended up being able to apply for the job. But because it's like a local government job, they can't just like make me, just give me the job. I have to apply with it along with everybody else. But I was like, I had such an edge because I was preparing for it for like a year already. Like when the time came, I was able to apply, and luckily enough, I was able to get hired. In this position, I did a whole bunch of things like develop and maintain internal tools used by the department. I ended up being like the SCCM, like System Center Configuration Manager admin, and we would do a lot of OS and software deployment, and just a lot of general like hardware refresh for the college and this kind of stuff. This was probably my second favorite job behind the lab assistant job, just because I had the same coworkers. They're all very nice. Everyone's smart. It was a really relaxed environment. I had a little bit more responsibility, obviously, because I was like a full-time staff. But everything was it was pretty good. The environment wasn't too fast-paced, so I had time to study, and I was able to get a lot of certs at this time, including like CSSP, CCNA, a whole bunch of CompTIA certs. It was just really good. It was a relaxing position, and I kind of regret quitting to this day, but I was able to get a lot more experience and exposure after quitting. The only thing I could say I really disliked about this position, it became kind of monotonous after 5 years, and it was really hard for me to increase my skill in an organic way since the environment didn't really change that much. It changed, but it was pretty slow, so it was hard for me to like develop new real skills, if that makes sense. So the next job is pretty interesting. My title was NetOps Jr, and I worked in Japan actually on a Marine Corps base, and the salary for this job was only $50K. So that was like a $25,000 or $26,000 pay cut from when I worked at the college. So the whole scenario of me quitting my job and then moving to Japan and working there is actually insane. The experience was really bad, and it deserves its whole own video. So I'm gonna do that later. So I won't dive into it too deep, but I'll cover the basics here. Basically, my time when I was working at the college as a full-time staff, I was studying Japanese quite a bit. I could get to the point where I could like speak, read, and write like basic conversational Japanese, and I wanted to try living in Japan. I had visited there like 4 or 5 times at that point, and I had my CISSP and some other certs that make you eligible, I guess, to work in Department of Defense, which I'll cover in another video. But I had some qualifications, and I found a job in Japan that just required CCNA, and I wanted to get into networking at the time, so I was like screw it, I just applied to it, and they got back to me like right away actually, and they're like, well, you have a lot of certs and your experience is good. So I ended up having like a really informal interview with the recruiting person, or like the recruiter, and they just hired me with no technical interview. After I got hired, I had to wait 4 months or so for my security clearance to finish processing, and once that processed, I just got my own ticket. There was no moving expenses paid to me or anything, so I packed all my stuff and I sold a bunch of stuff. I got my ticket and I just flew to Japan. I just moved there. After getting to Japan, I quickly realized that I wouldn't be able to do any work because it turns out they had sponsored me for the wrong security clearance. They gave me a secret clearance when to do my job I needed like top secret. I needed a top secret clearance with a polygraph, and that takes forever to adjudicate. So basically I wouldn't be able to do any kind of work for about a year or so. And the whole reason I ended up quitting my other beloved job before this was because it was just getting monotonous and I wanted to get new experience. So sitting around for a year was not really something I wanted to do at that point. I will say the things I liked about this job, my immediate supervisor was really nice, and I kind of had another guy, I think he was my supervisor. He was really nice too, and I got to work around a lot of Japanese people. It was like American military, like Marine Corps combat arms training base, but it was like full of Japanese civilians just like working everywhere, and I met a couple of friends there that I'm still friends with today. So that was the good part about it. I could meet a lot of friends, and my immediate bosses were nice. As for the things I disliked about this job, the list is actually too long to talk about right now, but the main things is I feel I got tricked to move out there because I couldn't even get the experience which I sacrificed my salary for, and I did experience some form of discrimination on the base, but I will talk about that in the video that I dedicate to this experience. And the reason why I quit should be pretty obvious, whole bunch of bad stuff, but before I quit, I gave a chance to my contracting company. I kind of explained everything that happened, and they know like what has been happening up to this point. And so I was like, I'll stay here and I'll keep working here, and you can keep the contract. Just give me like $5 more an hour, and then I will try to deal with it and make the best of it. And they said no, and then I immediately quit. After quitting my job in Japan, I stayed in Japan for another month or so. Then I moved back to the US and started looking for a new job. So the next job I got was my first contract at Microsoft. I was a Microsoft Intune support engineer, and I got paid $30 an hour for this job, or about like 60 to 62K per year. Basically, I was just job hunting on Craigslist and Indeed, and I found this particular job on Craigslist asking for skills with SCCM, because SCCM and Intune is kind of related. So I just applied to it, and I got an interview, and I got hired like pretty fast. It was like a week or so. Basically, for this job, me and my coworkers were all in this big room on the Microsoft campus in Redmond, and we would provide Intune and some SCCM, but mostly Intune support for large customers like Kodak and was it 3M and Rogers Corporation. Those people who had Intune as their mobile device management system, they would like call us for tech support, and we'd fix stuff for them and like help them with bugs and that kind of thing. The stuff I liked about this job is I'm glad that I could get at least some Intune experience, and working on Microsoft campus is pretty nice because the cafes are really nice. It's not free, but it's pretty cheap and it's pretty quality food, and then you get all kinds of free drinks, including like coffee and tea and juice and soda and like sparkling water. Like any of the drinks are free. And then my coworkers and manager were all like really nice to me. Actually, I ended up quitting after 2 months. Actually, it wasn't very long. I felt the department was like a little bit too disorganized for what I could deal with for how much I was getting paid, if that makes sense. Like they asked us what kind of training material we wanted, and then I was like, don't give me Pluralsight and don't give me anything that's publicly available because I've already consumed all of that. Please give me training on stuff that's not publicly available, like Kusto and like other stuff that's internal to Microsoft. And they're like, okay. And then they gave us like Pluralsight training like a week later, and I was like, I don't need this. And there's a lot of stuff that I asked for like kind of help for and guidance, but you don't really get that as a contractor. So I felt that I couldn't really do my job efficiently on top of the kind of low pay for what I felt that I was doing. It just became like too much, and I got kind of depressed, so I just ended up quitting that job after 2 months. And the next job I ended up getting was also a contracting position, but I was with REI, that kind of big sporting goods store, and my position there was point of sale. I think it was like point of sale support engineer or something like this, and the pay was $42 an hour. So that's about, what is that, like 84K or so, or 85K a year, something like this. I ended up getting this job through a recruiter. I was just kind of sitting around chilling with my roommate, and a recruiter just called me from Insight Global, actually, that kind of contracting agency, and they said like, what do you think about this contract with REI? You'll be doing like SCCM and all this other stuff that I've done before. And then they said it was $42 an hour, and I'm like, all right, yeah, let's just give it a go, I suppose. So I ended up going in for an interview with somebody on site at REI, and I waited for like a couple days, and then they called back and they're like, sorry, we picked somebody else. And I was like, all right. And then another week goes by, and they're like, oh, just kidding, like, do you want to come work here? And I was like, all right. So I just went and I started working at REI. So for tasks for this job, the whole project was around a point of sale refresh. So like all the registers and all their stores, they would be like swapping them out with like new ones and upgrading the software and the OS and all of that. So our job was to kind of facilitate that effort. So they would do a deployment at a store, and we would kind of stay up in the middle of the night and support them if anything broke. Also, we would kind of I did some like build verification scripts and testing. So for example, I made like a parser with PowerShell that would like look at all the hardware after the deployment was done, or look at all the logs for the hardware rather, and find errors like in the SCCM task sequence, and find errors in other log files, as well as ensure all the appropriate software was installed on the register. I liked a lot of things about this job. It was pretty good. I had a lot of technical work. I had meetings, but I didn't have to really contribute or like prepare content for the meeting. I was just like, in the back being like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And I didn't have a lot of responsibility for stuff that I hated doing. And my coworkers were nice. I'm friends with like almost all of them, even though it was like kind of a short time there. And then we had a lot of snacks and stuff and fruit and stuff like that in the kitchen, which was really nice, actually. The stuff I didn't really like is there was some kind of major failure in the project pipeline that prevented us from deploying point of sale systems to any more stores. So me and like the other like support engineer people were kind of like sitting around, like we didn't really have anything to do. So I was kind of creating my own work for a couple weeks. And after like the big roadblock in the project, they started like firing people. They fired like some of the program managers, and they fired like 2 of my coworker support engineers. So I was like, and I just ended up like giving my notice because I didn't have anything to do. I was like making my own work, and people were like getting fired around me. So I was like, I'm just gonna go. So that's how I ended up quitting. So the next job I had was actually in Oahu in Hawaii. And this job, I was working at a bank. It's called American Savings Bank, and my position was Endpoint Administrator, and the pay for this job was actually $75,000. The story of how I got this job is pretty interesting. I'll try to go over it like really quick. So basically, at the time, my now wife, we're married now, but at the time we were just friends and we are just chatting. We're just like texting a lot and like chatting online and stuff like this. And she's Japanese and she lived in Japan, but she got a visa to teach scuba diving in Hawaii. So she had been working in Hawaii for like the past like 2 months or something. And then I just quit the REI job and I was like, man, where should I work next? And then she was like already working in Hawaii and we were chatting and like I liked her and I was like, screw it, I might as well just like go to Hawaii and see like what that's like. So basically I ended up getting that particular job by I looked for some recruiters in Hawaii from like Tech Systems and some other like DoD contracting agencies. And I contacted some of them and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna move to Hawaii pretty soon. I'll be there in May anyways to visit. So if you could like set me up some interviews or something, that would be cool. So a guy at Tech Systems, he's really cool. He was really helpful to me actually, especially because I wasn't even like in Hawaii yet. He lined me up an interview with American Savings Bank, and then I just basically like went to Hawaii, and then I went to the bank on site, and it was a very interesting experience because the culture is like so different there. But I went to Hawaii, I went to the bank, and I had this big ass panel of people interviewing me. A lot of them I'm still friends with today. They were very cool, but I had like 9 or 10 people or some giant number of people in my interview panel, and they just kind of like asked me questions, and then it went pretty well, I guess. It was a pretty funny experience, but I ended up getting hired there. But yeah, that's how I got hired in Hawaii. As far as tasks went with this job, it was kind of like a mixture between SCCM admin and help desk. So basically I would do like a lot of application packaging and application deployments with SCCM, and I did quite a bit of PowerShell scripting for some other random stuff. We did a lot of vulnerability remediation as well, and it was an interesting environment because they had a whole bunch of banks on like the different islands like Hilo and Molokai and Kauai and all the Hawaiian islands, and the WAN link was like really slow between the islands. It was like something like 5 megabit, so we couldn't just like push stuff out whenever we wanted to. We had to like do it in the maintenance window so we wouldn't saturate the link or anything like that. So that was interesting. But yeah, it was pretty much just like SCCM work mixed with help desk. The things I liked about this job, probably my coworkers. I'm friends with a lot of them still, and there's some like really smart people working there. I was like really surprised. Not that I had low expectations or anything, but I just met some of the smartest people that I've ever worked with in Hawaii. It's very odd, but I'm friends with a lot of them still, and they were very cool. What else did I like? Hawaii is not really politically correct in the workplace, and it's really hilarious to me. It's like really funny because I'm from Seattle, and it's pretty we've become pretty PC here, but like in Hawaii it's not really. So I'm not like really easily offended. So it was like just like really funny for me, I guess. It was just probably my favorite parts of working there was like the social aspect. As far as dislikes go, there's not a lot I disliked about the actual work. Tech pay in Hawaii is typically like pretty low, so I feel my pay for what I was doing was like a little bit low. And I also didn't really like living in Hawaii or like being downtown because it's kind of dirty and it's just kind of expensive. And I ended up quitting this particular job just because I moved into another role in the same company. And the next position I had was also at American Savings Bank, and this position was Senior Information Security Analyst, and the pay was $97K. And how I got this job, at this point in my career, I was already like trying to get into cybersecurity in some way. So I was listening to podcasts every day. I was listening to like the Cyberwire with Dave Bittner and them, and I was listening to Recorded Future, and I was listening to Dark Knight Diaries with Jack Resider. I'm not sponsored by any of them, by the way. I'm just saying because I like their podcasts. And I was also studying for OSCP at the time. I was like going like really hard on security, like trying to like immerse myself in it and like get good at it. And one of the coworkers, I think it was like he was like a manager or director of governance or something at American Savings Bank. He noticed that I had CISSP on LinkedIn, and he's like, Josh, like Infosec is hiring, you should apply. And I looked at him like, I don't know, dude, it's like a senior position. I've never worked in security before, but he's like, just do it. So I applied, and then I ended up getting interviewed, and they actually ended up hiring me. it turns out like the department kind of knew me already, Infosec, because I had been remediating so many vulnerabilities at the bank. So they kind of knew like me and my department, and the interview went really well, and they hired me. So that's how I got that job. As far as the tasks I did in this position, I was like the SIM administrator. That's like SIEM. We used Logarithm, and I also administered the data loss prevention. We used ForcePoint there. So I configured like a lot of the alerts and stuff for the SIM, and I calibrated like DLP, like when it would block stuff, like when it would alert stuff. For example, someone tried to send like, 1,000 social security numbers like outbound on the bank, like maybe that would trigger something to stop them from doing it because it's too many socials or something like this. And then I also helped with like some incident response and some other kind of basic technical oriented security aspects of things. The stuff I liked about this job, I like doing technical stuff a lot, and I like doing security as long as it's technical. So that was like pretty fun. And using the SIM was pretty fun because you could see stuff like you could monitor like employee abuse. So when I was bored, like I can this is probably not good, but like you can see who's browsing, for example, who's browsing Facebook the most in the whole company. It's like just kind of funny and like kind of entertaining. It was a pretty fun job. And as far as dislikes go, I didn't really dislike that many things. I don't really like politics, and when you're in security and you start getting like kind of close to like the CISO or like kind of higher, I feel like the politics like gets more and more, and I freaking hate that. So I guess I didn't really like that, but I can just like ignore it, I suppose. And I ended up quitting this job because me and my wife got married. Me and my wife got married at the time, and then we were gonna move from Hawaii like back to Seattle. So that's essentially why I ended up quitting, or else I probably wouldn't have. So after quitting American Savings Bank and then moving back to Seattle, the very next job I got was a consultant at Avanade, and the salary for this job was $115K plus a $10K sign-on bonus plus another $2K cash bonus for just whatever. My friend actually worked at this company, and he was like, you should apply. So I was like, all right, because I was jobless. So he referred me to a recruiter, and I applied to the recruiter just like a normal person would, I guess. And then I had a whole bunch of interviews, like a bunch of phone interviews, like a general technical one. Then I had like a kind of security centric phone interview. They asked me some weird questions, like what are 3 recent security events in the world, and like some other kind of stuff I wouldn't expect them to answer. And then I ended up having an on-site interview with some director or something. It was pretty standard process. Then a couple days later, they just called and offered me the job. And after I got hired, they ended up flying so we were in Seattle, and they ended up flying all the new hires out to, I think it was Chicago, and we stayed in Chicago for a week for free in like this hotel, and we got a whole bunch of free food, and we got like some Chicago pizza or something, and we just had to attend like this kind of training orientation thing every day, it was pretty cool, I suppose. And since this was a consulting job, my first and only project, actually, I had to fly out to San Francisco every week to help with another point of sale kind of migration project, but this time it was for like that big clothes company Ross Dress for Less. They're doing like this massive POS migration. So for that job, I was writing PowerShell like all day long to help with the automation process. They would like change over a store at a time or whatever, and they had like a server in the store, and like a bunch of scripts needed to be run on the server to like switch over from the old system to the new system. So me and my coworker, who's now my pretty good friend, worked on that like all day long, just like PowerShell like 90% of the time. And the things that I liked about that job, since I got to travel so much, I got to use my own credit card, so I racked up like so many airline points and like so many hotel points. It was freaking nuts. Like me and my wife had to go to Hawaii later for like her relative's wedding, and our whole trip was just paid for from the points, like the hotel and the flight and everything. It was pretty cool. So I got a lot of points. We got a lot of free food sometimes from our managers. They were kind of slave drivers. Our managers worked for Accenture, and they were slave drivers, but as far as people go, they were pretty nice, and they got us food a lot. What else did I like about that job? It was pretty technical. I didn't have to do a lot of like weird meetings and like paperwork and stuff. I just could code for most of the day, which was pretty cool. It was kind of nice to travel around a little bit, I guess. As far as the stuff that I didn't like about the job, it was like a little bit disorganized, and a lot of the time the managers would be like, all right, I need you to do this and like overwork like 10 and 12 hours a day or something. But then like the next day or something, they would like throw away the work that I did because somebody changed their mind somewhere. And I don't really like, once in a while, like overtime, like unpaid overtime is okay, but it happened like 3 or 4 times. Like I would do work and then not get paid for it, and then the work would be like tossed out. And then eventually I talked to someone about it, but like it didn't change. So I just ended up quitting, because like I don't really like having my time wasted repeatedly, because I could be using that energy for like anything else. And come to find, that's kind of the norm in the consulting world, and I didn't really acknowledge that going in. So I mean, I guess that's kind of my bad. I guess I just won't be a consultant anymore, I suppose. But yeah, those were my dislikes, and that was the reason I quit. I ended up quitting the project, and I also like quit Avanade totally because of that, because I just didn't want to deal with like that much unpaid overtime. It was freaking nuts. But I did make a good friend working there, so that was cool. So after quitting Avanade, I was just kind of relaxing for a few months. I taught myself like Node.js and how to build APIs, and I was kind of building my own app and trying to level up my software engineering skills. And one of my friends who I met in Hawaii like actually moved to Seattle during this time, and he was looking for jobs, and he found like a security job at King County, and he just like linked it to me, and he's like, you should apply to this. And I was like, all right. So I just applied to it, and then like a week later or something, somebody from King County called me and did like a phone interview, and they asked me like a bunch of questions, like really kind of obscure specific questions, but I knew them because I took a class for that in community college, and I went like really hard on the class. Like there were like forensics based questions and something else odd, but I was like lucky and I could answer them. And then a week or so later, they like called me in to do like an actual interview, and I ended up doing all right in the interview, I guess, because they ended up hiring me. And the job title was Senior Information Security Engineer, and then the pay for that particular one was $118,000 per year with kind of normal government benefits, because it's like a local government job. As far as tasks go for the security engineer job, it was mostly like paperwork and meetings and like soft tasks like this, which I really hated. But so for example, I would have to do like a security reviews for projects. So imagine like your local county's police station wants to get like a SaaS solution to keep track of their inventory. Like they want to procure this SaaS solution. So I would just do a review on that. Like what kind of data are you going to be storing in that provider, and like what cloud provider do they use? Like are they SOC compliant or whatever? Do they do vulnerability assessments? And if they do, like send us an attestation of it. I just had to do some kind of security review to make sure whatever project the county was trying to do is secure or compliant with like PCI or whatever governing body, like I guess governs the data that's going into it. And that required like a lot of meetings and a lot of emails and a lot of this and like not very much like technical things. But I was just trying to kind of go with the flow and try to like do my best to be good at it. But after a while, it just got like really depressing, because I just really like doing technical things, and I don't like doing a lot of like weird paperwork, kind of like non-technical stuff. I really tried to get into it, but it was just like pretty hard for me. But for the things I liked about that job, my manager was like really, really, really nice, and my coworkers are all really nice. I didn't really have a problem with like any like interpersonal things. Just the work was kind of strange. The benefits were really good, right? We had like, full like health insurance and like pension and all of that good stuff. But as far as the stuff that I didn't like, in addition to like all the paperwork and like meetings and stuff, it's in like downtown Seattle on like 5th and Jefferson, if anyone knows where that is. It's kind of grungy, and I felt like unsafe working there, and I got like accosted by like a homeless person. They didn't like punch me or something, but they like ran up on me when I was like in my car like really early in the morning, and I was like, oh. I didn't like the area and like the paperwork and all that weird stuff. So I think I worked there for like, it was like 8 months or something. And then I felt so bad because my manager was so nice, but I was like, I'm so sorry. Like I have to quit. Like I really tried to work here, but I'm so sorry. And I just ended up quitting after like 8 months or so. At this point, like after quitting King County the first time, I was like kind of discouraged in myself, because I feel like I can't really hold on to a job for very long, like because I just tend to not like what I'm doing. Like after Avanade, especially in King County, I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna like level up my software engineering some more and try to like build some platform and like get money from it or something. So I resumed my coding and my projects, and I taught myself React, and I built a bunch of websites. Like I built a website for some local business, and I continued to work on my app. And then I was just like kind of hanging out one day, and then another recruiter called me and they were like, hey, do you want to be a security analyst at Microsoft on the Redmond campus? And I was like, oh, sounds cool, I guess, might as well try. So I talked to them, the recruiter, for a while, and then I ended up going onto the Redmond campus to talk to the PM for like the project and the team I was working on. And she asked me about like Azure and stuff, and if I was familiar with JSON and stuff. And like coincidentally, the project that I was working on, I used Azure like quite a bit for like a lot of the backend components. Like I used like Cosmos DB, and I used like Azure App Service to host my app. And then the whole API that I was making for my own personal project, like the whole of course, the communication between like the front end and back end and everything was all in JSON. So I was like, yeah, I know like Azure. And I kind of explained to her like my experience, and she was like, oh, that's cool, essentially. And then I think I can't remember if I had 1 or 2 interviews with them, but I had 2. I had a phone interview and a on campus interview, and they ended up hiring me. And that job was a really odd job. It was like the title was security analyst, but it was kind of like security analyst mixed with technical writer mixed with program manager, like all into like one kind of strange position. But that job paid like 119.5K or so. But I was contracting through a company called Neil Analytics, and then working for Microsoft on the Microsoft campus. And this job I really liked because I got to work with Azure a lot. Like I really wanted to learn Azure more in depth anyway before I ended up getting this job. So I really enjoyed it because it was kind of security centric and around Azure. So like our whole project was around kind of building a benchmark, like a security benchmark for Azure. So what we would do is we took like the CIS top 20 controls, like for example, like, you know, software inventory, hardware inventory, like vulnerability management, like all these things. And we framed it in a way that applies to Azure. So customers can like take the benchmark that we're building and then compare it with like the CIS controls and like just kind of go down the list and secure our Azure environment. And that's like what our whole job was. So we kind of had a general benchmark for Azure, and then we had like the same benchmark for like Azure storage and like Azure VMs and like Cosmos DB and like Postgres for Postgres SQL for Azure. So we kind of made this benchmark that applied to all the different Azure services. And then toward the end of my employment there, we kind of started doing that same thing, but for NIST 853 controls as well. And as for the things I liked about the job, both my managers, like super nice and super smart. Everyone there is really smart. I got to work with like really smart people, like routinely have like conference calls with people who are like in Israel or working on like Microsoft security stuff. Super smart people. That was cool. And then of course, Microsoft campus is cool. Like the campus has like so much food. It's pretty cheap, and it tastes good, and it's quality, and like all the free drinks and everything. And it was just a really good environment. And I had like a lot of autonomy to do not whatever I want, but like I wasn't really micromanaged. We'd have like a sync every day, and I just do my work, and then we'd sync up and then change direction if we had to. It was cool. It was like pretty technical. There was like a lot of meetings, but it was a cool job. The stuff I didn't like about it, of course, like with Microsoft as a contractor, you don't really get onboarded very well. It's kind of like, all right, you're doing your work now, like figure this out. And of course I could ask people, but like if you compare that to like an actual Microsoft employee, they go through this totally like different like onboarding pipeline, and maybe you get like some like real training and like all this other cool stuff. But like the contractor, you just have to kind of do your best and adapt to the environment. So I mean, I guess that's not that bad, but I would have preferred like more structure for onboarding, but you know, it wasn't that bad. There's not a lot that I didn't really like about this job. And while I was working at Microsoft, this is kind of where things get interesting, because back at King County, the management changed. Like my previous manager quit, and then there was like a new CISO, like a new Chief Information Security Officer, and then he was trying to build up the security program, and he knew that I worked at King County before, so he reached out to me, and he's like, hey, do you want to like come back to King County and like help me build this portion of the security program? And I was like, oh, that sounds cool, I guess. But he knew I quit last time because I was doing like too many meeting stuff, like stuff that I didn't like, essentially. So he's like, all right, you can like run this platform and do these other things that are kind of more technical, and then you can come back. You know, I'll bring you back on as like a contractor, because with government you can't. With government, you can't just bring someone in and just like put them in a position. They have to like apply for it properly. But if you're like a contractor, you have like 1,000 hours you can work as a contractor, and it's more easy to bring someone in as a contractor who you want if you want to like get some specific work done. So he was like, do you want to come back as a contractor? And I was like, oh my god, like this is was asking me to come back, like and it sounded pretty cool. So I was like, all right, like I'll go back to King County. And then but I actually like didn't want to quit Microsoft either, because I really liked what I was doing. So I was like, do you mind if I like try to work Microsoft at the same time and King County? And then he was like, yeah, let's try it out and like see how it is. So he was cool with it. And then I asked Microsoft, I was like, hey, King County called and they want me to like help them do something. Do you mind if I try to do both jobs? And like they didn't really want me to do it at first, because obviously you want your employees like focusing on like your own efforts, obviously, right? Like I can't blame them for that. But eventually they were like, all right, yeah, like you can let's try it and like see how it goes. So at that point I ended up going back to King County as a contractor, and that I got about it was about 130K or so at King County. And then I had my Microsoft job, which was about like 119 and a half or 120K or so. So there was like a period of time where I had both jobs, and I was getting like around like 250K for like, I did this for like 6 months or so, and the income was like really freaking bonkers. But I was working a lot. Like I wasn't working like 8 hours for one and 8 hours for the other. It was more like 10 to 12 hours per day, but it was really really dense work. Like I didn't have a lot of, it wasn't like leisurely work. It was like really dense, like 10 to 12 hours per day, because I would get up really early and then bang out a bunch of Microsoft work, and then I would start my King County work at 9 a.m. or something, and then my lunchtime, I would use my lunchtime at noon for a sync with Microsoft, and then I would just like continue working the rest of the day at King County. And I did it for like 6 months or something, and then the pandemic happened. Everyone's life turned upside down, like including mine, and I totally, like, my brain got like broken, and I got so burnt out. I had to quit one of the jobs, and I liked the Microsoft work more, but the workload was like so much for me, and I just needed something that wasn't so demanding. So I was like so sad. I had to like quit the Microsoft position, and they kind of urged me to apply to Microsoft full time, and it's really appealing to me, like even today. But I was just like so tired. I just had to quit Microsoft because it was like too much work. So then I just kind of resumed working for King County, and that's where I am today. And my new King County position, by the way, I didn't mention that, it was a vulnerability management program manager, and the pay for that one is 130K. So that's where I'm at today. I dropped the Microsoft salary. So sad, because that was so nice to have like dual income for one person. But I dropped the Microsoft salary, and I'm at 130K right now at King County, and I still work there. The things I like about King County is the manager, the CISO at King County, is like he's really smart and really good. It takes like really special person to be like chief information security officer for like local government that's as large as King County. And like kind of, I don't want to say like negative things but about the county, but it's a really challenging place to work, and I can't think of like a better person to do that job than him. I feel like he should like stop working there and go to like some federal position somewhere, like go work in like Washington or something. I don't know what he's doing here, but he's really good. All my coworkers are really nice. It's really lenient and really kind of a relaxed environment. It's really hard to do things with local government. It's hard to affect change. So if you're fine with stuff taking like a long time to implement, it's a pretty decent place. As far as the things that I don't like about my current job, it's hard to implement things. It's hard to affect change, and it's kind of a different environment than like the corporate world. Like in the corporate world, if you don't make money or you're inefficient and your company's inefficient, like the company like goes bankrupt or dies or something like this. And likewise in a private environment, like a corporate environment, if you underperform, you're more likely to be fired or disciplined, or like, something's going to happen to you if you underperform. But with the government, if you're like inefficient, maybe that your department may die at some day or something, but I guess you get money from like tax or whatever. So there's a lot more leniency for like, operating as an inefficient organization. And as far as like people in government, like full-time government employees, there's a lot more forgiveness for people underperforming or flat out refusing to do work. It's really hard to discipline people in that environment. So you kind of just have to go into it with a mindset of being like, okay, it's going to be a challenging environment because people potentially like won't be, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Maybe you understand what I'm trying to say. It's different than the corporate world, so you just have to go into it with that mindset. But it's all right. I still work there, and I didn't quit yet. I hope Well, I'm not really sure. I don't want to say anything like too crazy, but yeah, that's my IT experience. As far as advice goes, looking back on my career, if I were to give advice to anyone, I would say don't really, like if you have the idea in your head, for example, I'm going to use the pen tester example. Like if you have the idea in your head that you really want to be a pen tester and like you don't have interest in like doing anything else, I would recommend like being a little bit more lenient. Like maybe if you're trying to get into security as a pen tester and someone offers you like a security analyst job or like a SOC analyst job or something, be open to taking it, because maybe you get that job and that gets your foot in the door for security, and then you figure out you really like it and then you do something else that's really cool. But at the same time, like maybe don't be me and be like so open that you just do whatever like someone hands to you. Because that's how I ended up being. Like here I am, like I like doing technical stuff, but I kind of just like went with the flow and just did whatever like people asked, and I ended up in like a lot of weird positions. Like I'm a program manager right now, and like I mean there's worse things, but I don't really prefer that to like doing actual like hard technical work. I wish I was doing more technical things. So I guess be a little bit flexible like with your opportunities, but also kind of keep in mind some direction you want to go in. Just don't just don't do anything that comes your way, but just be open to it, I guess. And then always like try to make yourself better. Like if you need to quit a job or something, and if you have time in between, maybe like brush up on another skill or something. Because there's been like so many times where I was just doing something for my own benefit, like working in Azure or teaching myself some like new programming language or some like methodology or something. I would just teach myself it, and then it would really come in handy later, like coincidentally in like some job interview or something. So I guess know where you're going, be flexible, and then always like try to improve yourself, but don't burn yourself out, and don't work 2 full-time jobs, because that sucks. But yeah, this one took a while to make. I'm sorry it's so long, but if you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. It'd definitely help my channel. If you have any questions about career or like anything I said in this video, or I missed something, like feel free to like, ask me in the comments, or let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to answer anyone. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. 前のビデオ日本語を使ってなかった。ごめんなさい。許してくれるかな。